All right, so Spider-Man: Far From Home is coming out like tomorrow, maybe, depending on when I get this video out. But I'm not even going to say too much about this movie. I just want to say that we've come a long way when it comes to superhero films. There's still peaks and there's valleys, you know. Up here you've got Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and then, you know, somewhere down here you've got Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman. Then up here, you know, you've got Avengers: Infinity War and Endgame, and down here you've got stuff like Black Panther and Justice League. But the thing is, superhero movies have been around for a long time, since the late 1970s, actually. In prominence, that is to say. And there's a lot of different movies that are credited with the renaissance or the rebirth or the resurgence of quality superhero movies that changed the way that superhero movies are made from that point forward. And, you know, people say it's Superman 1978 or Batman 1989 or X-Men or The Dark Knight or Batman Begins or whatever. I don't think it's any of those, honestly. I really do think it's Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man movie. And that's not to say that Spider-Man's, like, the first Spider-Man movie is some like, next level, transcendent piece of cinema history that needs to be preserved and never forgotten about and taught in film school because of the framing and the dialogue and the scripting and the blocking that they used in the CGI. None of that is why I think this movie is so important in the history of comic book movies. I think it's important because, much like movies like Shazam and Spider-Man: Homecoming recently, it's not afraid of the fact that it is a comic book movie. Let me tell you what I mean by that.
Why do like the wreck you hide behind that mask you?
Say what you will in defense of the Dark Knight trilogy, Batman did not get a Batman costume properly until Batman vs. Superman. I mean something that looks like what he wore in the 90s series by Todd Aaron Smith. Something where he's just got the gray bodysuit and the black bat and the cape and the cowl. Christian Bale was wearing hockey pads. What's his name? Michael Keaton was wearing a leather skin suit. Val Kilmer, George Clooney, we don't need to talk about what those guys are wearing. But by and large, a lot of superhero movies that came before the original Spider-Man, like X-Men, Blade, well, I guess, you know, I will give Superman credit for this. Leave me alone. The Superman suit in the original movies was very accurate to Superman's costume because Superman's costume is iconic since he's the first superhero, and it's very hard to screw that type of costume up, yet somehow it happens, like on Supergirl. Point is, though, by and large, between then and by the time Spider-Man came out, you had these, like, updated, more modernized, edgier, cooler, sleeker looking versions of the costumes. Like the X-Men had their all black leather suits. Batman had what he had. And I don't really understand why they did such a thing. Then you have Steel, and Spawn was mostly accurate, but there's no excuse for Steel. But when you get to Spider-Man, sure, it doesn't look like a proper Spider-Man costume, not the way that you're used to seeing it, where the spider is like bulbous on his chest and the one on his back looks like a crab. But it's still a Spider-Man suit come to life. And sure, there's a little bit of the artistic style of the movie spread on top of that, but it's still Spider-Man. And the Green Goblin suit, yes, is revamped to look more modern and like tech-savvy or whatever. But that's because even now, I don't think you could get the proper Green Goblin suit to look acceptable on the big screen. I think it would always look a little silly. But they tried very hard to make it feel like you were looking at Spider-Man off the page onto the big screen, and I will forever give them props for that. Good work, Sony, Sam Raimi, everybody at Columbia. Then you have these movies that are departures across, like, departures from the original characters and how they're supposed to be, like X-Men and how they treated Wolverine and Cyclops and Magneto, and Blade and how they treated Blade, not being the way he is in the comics. Same with Batman. When it got to Kilmer and Clooney, I don't know why those movies were comedies, but that's just what they did. But Spider-Man's personality was ripped straight from the page and on the screen as well. He was still quippy. He was a jokester. The most important things about his character were still kept intact, in that he's a young person. He's the most relatable hero because of the problems that he faces in his normal life are the problems that all of us face at some point. We all worry about school and work and romance and trying to balance everything while life is falling apart. We've all been poor. Well, I can't say we've all been poor. A lot of us have been poor. Some of us are still poor. Spider-Man's still poor. That's why we relate so much to him. Some of us have been different from the people around us, and we can't say anything about that because what is it supposed to be? It's all very down to earth and relatable for that character, and it's very important that they kept that intact when they got to adapting it to the big screen. I really appreciate that they still held everything about Spider-Man that makes him who he is in such high regard when it came to writing him and characterizing him with Tobey Maguire. So again, big ol' thumb up. And then last but not least, because I don't want this video to be overly long, is the tone of the movie. And that goes from staging and framing and shot composition all the way up to the score itself, because the Spider-Man theme song that Danny Elfman wrote for these movies is still iconic, and I wish I could play it for you without getting copyright claimed. But the point is, all of that really helps you feel like you're reading a comic still, because I'm pretty sure that when you're watching Spider-Man swing through New York, music a lot like that plays, and that's why I appreciate this game so much, is because the music in this game does a very good job of capturing the same feelings that the music from the original Spider-Man movies also leaves you with. And then there's the scenes where like he's learning his powers, and the way that those shots are framed, it's a lot like a comic panel would be when he first climbs a wall, when he first shoots the web, when he first puts on his costume. It's all framed very comic book panel-like, and it's very important for the immersion that you still feel connected to what's going on in interesting and dynamic ways. All of that was very carefully done by Sam and Danny over a very long period of time to make sure that this movie not only stood aside from the crowd of superhero movies that already existed by then, but also could kind of help usher in a new era of superhero movies, be the spark, the fire that filled comic book fans with hope. And I hope you have appreciated this educational lecture, because I don't want to hear another person tell me that The Dark Knight revolutionized superhero movies from that point on, because it didn't. It did not change the game. It did not make other studios adapt how they made superhero movies. Since Spider-Man has come out, we've had costumes like Iron Man's suit, and Captain America's suits, and the Batman suit in Dawn of Justice. And then you have the suits that the X-Men wore at the very end of Apocalypse. You've had all these suits that are comic accurate. You've had all these movies that use score and soundtrack and framing and stuff like Guardians of the Galaxy and Suicide Squad to make you feel like you're reading a comic. Not good comics necessarily, as evidenced by the fact that Suicide Squad is lumped in with that, but it's still an effort to give the movie an identity because Spider-Man did it so long ago. And that's the important thing, is that Spider-Man has still been informing the way superhero movies get made for the last, 16 years? 17 years. And all that's very... Why is my computer freaking out? But all that's very important in remembering, what it takes to make a good superhero movie now. Just remember what was done in Spider-Man 1 from 2002, and just try to capture some of the things that movie may have made you feel. And that's all it really takes. But thanks for coming to my TED Talk, and hopefully I can get this video to be over 10 minutes long, so I can put a bunch of ads in it and you guys can pay me. And I'll see you very, very soon.